Hi, my name is Matthias and welcome to a new tutorial. To finish up my series about mono and stereo treatment, we have to speak about one of the most common and most used methods. Instead of doing everything yourself, diving deep into mid-side processing and EQing, you can simply use a simple plugin doing the job for you. Don't get me wrong, all the time before wasn't wasted. I find it necessary to know about the theory behind, and there will be situations for sure where you need absolute control about what's going on. But there will be many times as well where you can make your life much easier by simply loading the right plugin doing the job for you. There are lots of such plugins available, and I will not be able to show all of them. This is just a selection of what I have already installed anyway, to demonstrate what you should look for and how to test. For testing, we need two different scenarios. We need to be able to generate stereo width on mono sources, and we want to enhance the width of stereo sound to make them even wider. The plugin must meet two requirements to be recommended. What they do has to sound good, and the final result must be mono-compatible. For my testing environment, I chose a supersaw sound for two reasons. Because of its already phasing and flanging character, it reveals weaknesses very easily in the kind of how the plugins try to add width. And to be able to switch easily between mono and stereo by just changing the unison panning. Let's demystify first quickly this mysterious knob in FL Studio's mixer, which is labeled stereo separation. By default it is centered. Turning this knob to the right, the hint bar tells me stereo would be merged to an adjustable percentage. The opposite tells me doing stereo separation. Letting play my supersaw in mono and changing the knob doesn't do anything. As soon as my sound got some stereo information though, I can narrow down this again up to pure mono with stereo merging. Or I can make it sound wider. Looking a bit more in detail shows that this knob is basically a simple volume control. It just controls the volume of the side signal. A mono signal doesn't carry any side information, so here the knob cannot change anything. For a stereo signal though, it can either turn down the side volume up to silence, which makes my sound more and more mono, or I can raise the side volume, which gives the impression of being more wide than before. Looking at my meters I have here, there isn't any change in the mids at all. The side volume though gets changed up to silence when being 100% on merge, and up to +3 or 4 decibel when being completely separated. This knob doesn't change your sounds at all. As being a simple volume control, it's usable on any kind of stereo sound to make it quickly more narrow or more wide sounding. Just be aware that because the side level is raised, the sound gets a little bit louder in general. There is no automatic compensation. The setup for testing mono compatibility will be always the same for every plugin we look at. Just take the first stereo separation knob coming after the function you have applied and do and undo your changes. If you don't hear any or just very minor changes in the sound, like in this case there cannot be any change at all, we state this process is mono-compatible. This stereo separation knob we find as well in the stereo enhancer. But don't get fooled, this isn't the same process. Feeding a mono signal into this plugin and turning the knob to merging doesn't do anything like we saw on the mixer channel. Turning the knob to the left though, let the mono signal get quieter. And this is a good indicator that there's more involved than a simple volume control for the side signal. Using a stereo source though reveals that the 100% merged signal isn't really merged and leaves still some side signal alive. The stereo separation goes really wild and let the generator dance around like crazy. So their image line was trying to bring in some psychoacoustic stuff to artificially add more stereo information than there was before. For me, this attempt failed. There is a huge difference turning the plugin on and off for our mono tests. The mid-volume of the mono signal drops from -12 to -24 decibel. And even with smaller amounts, there is too much volume drop for my taste. For me, this plugin failed in either way. Neither I can use it to make my sound mono, nor to widen it in a mono-compatible way. Already better, the Stereo Shaper. There's a nice Stereo Widen preset. As this plugin doesn't have any mix knob, I used the effect slots mix knob instead. First on a mono source. It can widen the sound a whole lot. But it isn't really mono-compatible. Yet usable with smaller amounts. On stereo sources though, it does really a good job up to mix level of 80%, which brings already a much wider stereo image. So be careful with the Stereo Shaper on mono sources, but feel free to use it on stereo signals. There are some more presets you can experiment with, which sometimes behave better on mono signals, but they are still far away from being mono-compatible, as they always killed the low end of the sound. Polyverse free plugin Wider is quite popular. On mono sources it can create already lots of stereo, and it keeps always its promise to be 100% mono-compatible. But for me this plugin is an absolute no-go. Because of being working with comb filters inside, it adds this ugly flanging sound to the original when being turned up more than 50%. Especially on stereo sources where 100% is the normal stereo image. This difference in sound isn't acceptable. There might be sources where it's less noticeable, but with all of its competitors being much cleaner in sound, why should I bother to fight with this plugin? Be very careful with this plugin and take care what you're doing. Melda's free MStereoExpander acts about the same like our knob in the mixer. On mono sources it doesn't do anything. Means it cannot create any stereo information. It can just change stereo information, but with more control and in a much extremer way than our mixer knob. No matter what it does it 100% mono-compatible. For being free and having deeper control than our native stereo separation, it's definitely recommendable for stereo sources. Melda offers 4 different stereo processors. I just own the second one, which is the MStereoGenerator. As the name already suggests, this isn't able to make a sound more mono, but to create additional stereo information on even mono sources. The interesting take on this plugin is that you've got basically an equalizer in here to pronounce or attenuate frequencies from the stereo generation. Depending how wild you go with the EQ setting, it's not always 100% mono compatible. A completely different approach offers MSpectralPan, which is free as well and let you do all kind of weird stuff over the whole frequency range. All mono compatible. Kilohertz stereo is again a bit like our mixer knob. It can create stereo information, but is able to increase the side volume even more. And change the mid volume as well. And this is my number one. The Ozone Imager 2 is for me the best stereo widener, and it's freeware. It is 100% mono compatible and can create beautiful stereo widening on mono or stereo sources with just controlling the sides volume, or two different stereo creation algorithms. If there is a plugin I can recommend without restrictions, it is for me the Ozone Imager 2 from iZotope. Have a great time, stay tuned, and thank you for watching.